This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am joined today by the Sustainability Program Manager for New York Wines, Mr. Justin Jackson, who's joining us from the Hudson Valley. How are you today, Justin?
Doing great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So tell us a little bit about the sustainability program when it comes to New York wines. About how it came about and how it's developed throughout the years, because 2023 is when it really came to the fore and actually became a thing, right?
Yeah, so there's always been a push in New York to, you know, be more sustainable in agriculture, especially amongst vineyards with the strong consumer relationship. And so I want to say back in it was 2001 or 2006, there was a movement and a workbook was put together called the Vine Balance Workbook through a collaboration of stakeholders and Cornell. And this workbook was essentially guidelines on how a vineyard could improve its practices to be more environmentally sustainable and a little bit more socially equitable. And that was kind of taken and run with for a little bit. And in 20, I want to say 15, the Long Island Sustainable Wine Growing Program came about because they have shallower water table, very specific growing conditions. And so they wanted some way to police growers in their state, but also represent to consumers the extra effort being put in. And then obviously the rest of New York was a little jealous that they didn't have a way of communicating their responsible
Yes.
production and also updated guidelines on how they could improve themselves. And so we started back in 2022 putting together this program. We took the Vine Balance workbook as the basis because a lot of growers were familiar with it. A lot of people around the industry were comfortable with how the workbook flowed. We really updated it and made sure it encompassed all three parts of sustainability: the social aspect,
Mhm.
the economic aspect, and the environmental aspect. And we put it out there. So it's really nice because not only does it work as a way of recognizing responsible production, it also works as kind of a guideline for growers to see how they can improve and giving them actionable steps for how to become more sustainable, more responsible producers.
Now, was your program based on any existing programs that are already around in North America?
Yeah, of course. New York is definitely a little bit behind the curve for as
Right.
large of a grape growing region as it is, but we look heavily, obviously, to California in terms of the structure. But one thing that I think we're really happy with is that we made it New York specific. So while California, has great sustainable wine growing alliance or the Lodi rules,
Mm,
their growing conditions are quite different than ours.
very much.
And if we put the same strictures on our growers, it wouldn't really be sustainable because we have to understand that economic sustainability is one of the core pillars of it. And so we really work closely with, again, Cornell academics, extension agents, growers themselves to set the standards that work for New York agriculture in specific, but keeping our standards in line with kind of international certifications, right? We aren't out here greenwashing. We want to make sure that we're keeping the same level of sustainability as someone in California, but for New York. So we may be more strict in some aspects and less strict in other aspects.
Well, that makes complete sense because the disease pressure faced by a more marginal growing region like New York, like Ontario, for example,
Mhm.
very, very similar in certain aspects. The disease pressure is entirely different. Therefore, your stipulations for sustainability must be quite different.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, I think out west, water pressure is going to be, one of the main factors they're
Sure.
facing.
Yep.
But here in New York, huge disease pressure. But on the other hand, a lot of times we have very deep, fertile soils. And oftentimes controlling vigor is the issue as opposed to getting growth. And so water and irrigation, not really an issue outside of Long Island, cover crops everywhere. Also, our vineyards are a lot more spread out. right? Oftentimes, vineyards are small areas with surrounding native grassland or woodland. And so we're very good at supporting regional biodiversity and, just surrounding ecology around our vineyards compared to some place where it's just acres and acres of vineyards. So it's nice to see different approaches to sustainability really tailored to local growing conditions.
Right. Now, I know you'll probably know the answer to this, but I'm very curious as to how much New York wine growers were embracing aspects of biodynamism, organic viticulture, and indeed sustainable viticulture as a whole before this certification progress came into play.
Yeah, so looking at, stuff like biodynamics and organics, those are difficult to do in New York.
Yeah.
One, like the talking the disease pressure, and oftentimes vineyards throughout the state are along waterways or large bodies of water, such as the Finger Lakes, the Hudson River, or in Long Island, their shallow water table. And so putting out the copious amounts of copper that would be required to be organic or biodynamic would oftentimes be more harmful to the
Yes,
local
of course.
environment. That being said, New York growers, I think, have been very proactive in trying to find what works for them. Again, this program came from a push from growers throughout the state. It wasn't something that we created and they joined. We created it based off of their demand to support them. The Vine Balance Workbook back in 2001 was created at their demand. So, yeah, a huge push to improve, to conserve the local natural resources, and to be better viticulturalists all around.
Now, where does the money for this program come from? What kind of cost is there for the wine grower in this program?
Yeah, so currently the program is entirely free.
I
The
see.
funding presently comes from me writing grants. So we're going to try and keep that
Great.
going
Yeah.
as long as possible because we understand margins can be tight, and we're really doing this to help serve growers throughout the state.
So I'd like to understand a little bit more about how this works. Just say I've got Drummond vineyards consisting of three vineyard sites, somewhere, let's say Finger Lakes here.
Yeah.
I've been doing this, my family's had this since the early days, conventional agriculture for the most part,
Mhm.
viticulture. I've been doing quite well. I've got some pretty heavy yields going on there, at least heavier yields for the region for sure. I've got this whippersnapper who's coming at me from from the sustainability program, trying to sell me on this. Like, how do you sell that to a grower who is a little bit more old school, shall we say?